Hello, everybody. Please let me know if I'm too quiet or too loud. Hello, Sean. Sean says hi, Eddie. Gabriel says hello, Eddie and friends. Hello, Gabriel. Nice to see you. Janelle uh, says hi, Eddie. What a great intro. Today was not my best one. I went for notes that didn't come out, but I guess that happens when you're improvising. So, um, okay, volume is perfect. Gabriel says volume is perfect. Good. Hello, Jeffrey. Nice to see you. Um, Before we get started, I want to make an announcement. So before we do the announcement, I want to explain a little something. In an effort to make these Q and A videos a little bit more productive, let me get this. Okay. To make them a little bit more productive, I have I have decided to start indexing the topics, and I also am now trying to coordinate the ads with those indexes so that the ads start right before a new topic. Um, and you don't get the ads if you're here live. I turn the ads off for the live stuff. But then once we're done, I put the ads on, and I try to space them so that they're with the topics, so that you can listen to the whole topic without being interrupted by ads. But this is a new thing. I only started doing it about 2-3 weeks ago, and the problem with it is it takes time. So, and I want to do it this way, but to justify it, I have to do less of the Q and A's. So I hope that makes sense. I think what we're going to do is go to one a month, the first Friday of each month. And, I've been trying to try different times. This is the time that works, so we're just going to stick with 2 o'clock on Friday. So whatever the first Friday is of each month, that's when we'll have the Q&A. We'll try that for a while, see if that works. I really want to do, I guess people say, up my game. I don't normally use slang like that, but I'm trying to improve the experience. So Gabriel says this is a nice T-shirt. He says, "This is a shirt that my student gave me, and I've actually mentioned it here before. These are the steps that I use to help my students get into all-state band. And when it after his last lesson, he came and had this T-shirt made up. It has my logo on the back, and he presented it to me as a gift, as a going away gift. I think he went to university in Georgia or Alabama or something like that. Very smart kid. Um, but yes, these are the stages that I teach: listening, working backwards, play it 50 times, memorize it, then over prepare, and then before you get there, you're supposed to rest. Those are the steps that I teach for Allstate. Hello, Cardo. Nice to see you. All right. So we have, let me double check now, but we have two questions, I believe. I hope I'm not. I had to go to the post office right before this. So, yes, so there's no new questions on the website. I do have a question from Leonard from last week. Let me double check my emails too while I'm at it. I think we'll start with Leonard's question first. Leonard, and I'm going to let me read his question exactly so that it's Leonard says, could you perhaps speak about how to learn to let go and truly express the music versus so-called technical players playing accurately, missing the musical aspect though? And on the surface, that seems like a contradiction, right? Um, so let me summarize his question. How do you become a more heartfelt, sincere, expressive player without letting all the quality stuff go down the tubes? I think that's what he's saying here. Because it says playing accurately, missing the musical aspect though. I think that's what he's saying. So, first of all, I want to say that that is an advanced thing. That's something that we should all be striving for. It's not something that you can just snap your fingers and all of a sudden you're doing that. Uh, being so we'll say that first. It's not automatic. And then I'm going to say over here is that there are some people that can go their entire careers and remain these this technique without heart kind of players. There are some people like that, and it has to do with where their heart is. You know, I have this observation that I've been doing lately. You guys know that I teach listening, right? I tell you all the time that you should be doing some listening, and I still listen, and I listen just like, last year we did 2 months of listening, a listening series. I think it's 8 videos I did on listening, on the subject of listening. And so I don't only listen to the guys that I think are going to make me a better player. I also listen culturally so that I know what's going on in my neighborhood or in my, like, other trumpet players. So when I say neighborhood, I'm not talking about just Houston. I'm not just talking about Texas. I'm talking about more like an internet geography, people I kind of sort of hang around with. Um, and so I'm trying to say this in a way that people don't get offended. I spend some time listening to students. I spend time listening to up and coming players. And there's a lot of times when I'm listening, and the word that came to me recently was, this band does a lot of stuff. And that word has been sticking with me all this time. This band does a lot of stuff. They they play hard songs, they play they play hard licks. They do a lot of stuff, but you can listen to the whole recording and there's not a connection. There's not an emotional human connection between what's happening there and what's happening here. Now, I understand that some things connect with some people and other things connect with other people, and that's personal. So I can only speak on this from my own perspective. There are recordings that sound like it's just a bunch of stuff. Like if I play and I'm trying to play, like in my improv, if I'm trying to play stuff that will impress you, that's stuff. If I'm afraid that you might not like the way I play, and I let that affect the way I play, it might come out sounding like stuff. So that's the word I've been stuck with lately in my head, the way I see this. If you play stuff so that people will like it, there's no heart connection. So how do you get to where you're being more expressive without losing that quality? I think it goes back to who you are and being honest about who you are, and that honesty should apply not only to your performance, but to your practice time, to your listening, to your exercises, to the teachers that you choose to work with. All of it should be consistent with your personality. I think that's the first step. I know that sounds overly philosophical, but I believe that's the first step. So, like for example, I remember a friend of mine said that he had a recording project, and every time they decided they want to make a recording that would make them a lot of money, and they noticed that what was happening, the albums that were making the most money sounded corny to them. So if they were recording this album and it sounded too hip, if it sounded hip, if it made them like it, they was, oh, we got to get rid of that. It's not going to work. Because if we like it, this is the assumption, right? If we like it, they're not going to like it. Millions of people out there aren't going to like it. And so what you end up, when you do that, what you end up with is stuff. It's insincere. You know what else can be insincere is if you are going to an audition. There's another story I talk about where this student was coming down here to Houston for lessons, but then he was auditioning in Dallas, and he thought he had to. I'm a Houston guy; he has to play like Houston for me, and when he's in Dallas, he's got to play like Dallas. He thought he had to do that, or he wasn't going to win the contest. That's stuff. We don't want that. When you play like that, you're not going to be expressive because you're being fake at the core of who you are. So I think it has to start with that, and that has to be implemented at every level of what you do. So for example, if you are a what do you call it, a if your personality is a entertainment personality, you like to cut jokes, and you're just a very bubbly person, then that's how you should be practicing. And that's what you should be striving for. Something that's consistent with who you are. Me, I'm not like that. You know, when I go to the Renaissance Festival, it used to be that everybody in the Renaissance Festival had to speak the these and thous and all that stuff, and I couldn't do that because that's not who I am. I'm not an actor. I'm not a entertainer. I'm a serious musician, and I like the Renaissance Festival because I'm playing serious music at the Renaissance Festival. That brass music, that that the Baroque and Renaissance brass music, that's serious music. And to play that for 4 hours on a Saturday is awesome. But I can't be the one that says, all of that Renaissance jargon. I can't talk like that because I'm not an entertainer. I can't get into the role. So now all we have to do is wear costumes, right? We don't have to talk like that. All right, so I think that's how it works, and that should set the track. Now, I will also, just because I know it was Leonard that asked this, I will also say that whatever religion you are, I'm a Christian, Leonard's a Christian. I think that plays a very big role. Leonard knows my story about how I made a big change, not only in my practicing, but also in my writing, where because I used to keep that all separate from my religious life. And I recently brought I say recently, in the 90s, the last part of the 90s, I brought all of that together. My religion is part of who I am. My trumpet playing is part of who I am. My trumpet playing, when it expresses me, is expressing my religious ideals, right? So I will also say that. Um, I think that's what it takes to do what Leonard is asking, is to be 100% open, honest, and what's the word I used earlier? Um, Sincere. Okay. All right. Let me get to some of these. Cardo says, Eddie, I am incorporating the pyramid philosophy into my routine. So far, it feels good. The only thing is that I have some difficult buzzing my mouthpiece. Free buzzing, on the contrary, feels okay. Wow, that's the opposite of what it usually is. Okay. Um, wow, I've never encountered that before. What that might mean is that your mouthpiece might be the wrong size. Now, I'm saying, did I say wrong? Right. your might your mouthpiece might be the wrong size. I don't normally jump to mouthpiece as a solution to things. I don't normally do that. And here's another thing, I don't make mouthpiece changes lightly. I think mouthpiece changes should happen over a period of months or years of very thought out processes. You don't just try a mouthpiece because that can be more expensive than buying a trumpet. Because if you just try stuff like randomly, it can actually cause you to even play worse too. But that's my first thought, is if you can buzz well without the mouthpiece, but then you put the mouthpiece on there and you can't buzz, there's one of two things going on there. Either, okay, well, let's back up a little bit. Let me grab my mouthpiece. Let's talk about how to hold the mouthpiece when you're doing this, especially when you first start. Don't hold it like this, okay? Because then it's not going to adjust to your mouth contour. Hold it between two fingers, no more than two fingers. Only hold it tight enough that you can put it snug on the lips. Now, when you go up and down, it has that same fulcrum we were talking about last week on the horn. It will adjust to your lips. So that is one possibility, that you might be holding it this way to where it won't adjust to what you're doing. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that you're putting it somewhere on your face that it shouldn't be. So, as an example, and I don't know anything about you, Cardo. So, um, we have some teachers teach that the mouthpiece should be dead center. If you're not a dead center person and you try to put the mouthpiece dead center, it won't work. So that's another possibility, is that your mouthpiece placement might be in the wrong place. For those of you who don't know this, my mouthpiece position is so far over. That's where my mouthpiece position is. Look at that. It's so far over, I can only put one finger on this side and over two fingers on this side. You see that? And notice that when I'm holding it, I always hold the mouthpiece with the left hand, because otherwise I'm going to have my hand all the way over here. See how my mouthpiece faces off to the side? You see that? Okay. That means I have to hold my horn off to the side. You see how far off that is? If I try to hold the horn straight out, I can't play, because it won't even feel on this side. So that's something to keep in mind. But so there's three things we're talking about here. You might be in the wrong position. You might have the wrong size mouthpiece. And you might be holding it too rigidly. Anthony says, Eddie, where are you? I'm right here. I don't know what that means. Jared, hello, Jared. Jared says, hi, Eddie. Is it really possible to permanently damage your embouchure? Yes, that's true. What exactly does that mean, and how does it work? Well, there's two ways you can permanently damage your embouchure. One is neural. You can kill the nerves in your embouchure. So, and as you know, you probably do know, most people know, if you kill nerves, they stay killed. When your nerves die, your nerves are dead forever. Okay? That's one thing that doesn't come back. So that's the first thing that can damage your lips permanently, is if you have, now, keep in mind that we have two sets of nerves. We have auto and sensory. So the idea that you could feel your lips and not have nerve damage is not necessarily true, because being able to feel your lips means you don't have sensory nerve damage. It's a different branch of nerve for motor. And if the nerves in your lips are cut off from oxygen for too long, perhaps, I don't, and this is just me thinking, right? I'm not an expert on this kind of stuff, but to me it seems possible that you could kill one without killing the other. So the nerves that tell your lips what to do might be dead, while the nerves that tell that feel the sensation in your lips might not be dead. Okay, so there's that. The other one is not technically permanent, but what I've heard is that the insurance companies won't pay for the surgery. So it might as well be permanent. What happens is, and I got this out of the ITG journal. What happens is, so let's say this is your muscle and this is your skin. Now the muscle is attached to the skin. That way, when you curl your lips in, the skin curls with it. Okay? Now what the kind of damage that can happen is that the skin and the lips can separate from each other. So that when you curl your lips in, the muscle curls, but the skin doesn't follow. And that Like I said, it's not permanent because you can have it operated on and fixed. The problem is that what I read in the ITG journal was that the insurance companies won't cover that. So that surgery might as for a lot of people might as well not be possible. And if it's not possible, then for practical purposes, um, that injury is permanent. Now, how do you get the first one? How do you get nerve damage? You get nerve damage by not taking the horn off of your chops to let the blood flow through. You guys know that I teach the rest as long as you play. So if you played something for 15 beats, take the horn off your lips for 15 beats. That allows the blood to go back through the lips. This is especially important for people who use a lot of pressure. Play, 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 rest, 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 rest. Play, 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 rest, 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 rest. When you rest, you make sure that the nerves and all the other tissues in your face are getting the blood and the oxygen and the nutrients that they need. It does take a long time. You have to be really dedicated to the trumpet to practice that wrong to get that problem. But it does happen. Now, what about this splitting of the separating of the muscle from the tissue, the skin tissue? That's from overblowing. That's from blasting. Okay? That's from playing way, way, way too loud. So your lips vibrate violently, and after a while, the the tissues just tear apart from each other. Anthony says, "I hope you're okay." Yes, I'm okay. I hope you're doing well too, Anthony. Nice to see you. I wonder if Anthony's here. Oh, he says hi, baby. All right. Gabriel says, Eddie, what are exactly the corners of the embouchure and how should they work going higher? That's a subject I try to, when people start talking about corners, that's one of those things, you know what that's like? It's, when you eat alligator, and people say, what does it taste like? And they say, oh, it tastes like chicken. But what does that mean to the person who hasn't had alligator? The bottom line is alligator does not taste like chicken. Right? Alligator tastes like alligator. I like alligator, by the way. Um, there used to be a restaurant down the street here that um, that served like uh, like an appetizer plate, and so it would have like 4 pieces of alligator on there. I like alligator, but you can't know what alligator tastes like until you have alligator. That's how I feel about the corners. If I tell you how my corners are, what good is that to you? And I had an epiphany into my uh, teaching career because I remember I used to teach when I first started teaching. uh, when I first started teaching, I used to teach what everybody else taught, and I used to teach about making firm corners. And then I realized 15 years later I had stopped talking about corners, and I it dawned on me that my corners are firm when I'm playing, but they just don't feel firm because I've been doing this for so many years. So, and if that's true, what feels firm to me is not going to feel firm to you because we have different strengths. So the way for all of this stuff, it always has to go back to what do you sound like? we don't want to get sidetracked by these kinds of things. I'm not saying don't talk about corners, but we don't ever make a decision about how to play the trumpet based on information. Remember my little rule. I have a rule that says all physical work should be for musical reasons. So if you find that for you, loosening the corners gives you a better sound or better technique or um, better flexibility or whatever, then you should loosen the corners. If you find, on the other hand, that tightening the corners gives you a better sound, better technique, better range, whatever, then you should tighten the corners. And that's about as scientific as it should get. I know there's a lot of people that talk about this stuff. I think the reason they talk about this stuff is because it can't be quantified. Quantified. It's something that is, on the surface, sounds kind of scientific and logical, but because it cannot be measured, and I can't measure it, and I can't tell you what my measurements are so that you can measure your own against mine. This is not possible. So they talk about this thing that appears on the surface to be something that we can put our hand, grab a hold of and say, yes, this is something objective and logical that we can talk about and makes me right about what I say. And if you can't get it, that's because you're not doing the corners right. And it really is just a way for them to manipulate people. That kind of talking is just a way to manipulate people. It means absolutely nothing. The only time the corners matter is when what you're doing with your corners is changing anything. And what do you do with your corners? You have to do what makes you sound better. Now, in general, we want the corners to oh, I missed the first part of your question. You said, what are the corners? The corners are where all these muscles come together, right at the edge of the lips. If you look at the anatomy books, there's a bunch of, uh, we have the orbicularis oris, that's the lip muscle. And then we have a bunch of muscles that come from different parts of our face to connect to the corners of, and over here too, but there's a bunch of them that come to the corners of the lips, and those muscles give us this, right? And they go against the orbicularis oris. That's why we can do so many shapes with our lips, right? Because of this contradiction, opposing force between the orbicularis oris and these other bacchanario and all that stuff. There's different muscles here that do this. So that's what the corners are. Should they be firm? They should be just firm enough. It's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. We don't want the papa. We don't want the hard one. We don't want the soft one. We want the one that's just right. Okay? We want things to be pulled here, but not pulled so much that it gets a bad sound. So how do you know you're doing it right? By how it sounds on the horn. That's the only right answer. That is the only right answer. So should they be firm? You can't play the horn without it being firm. It's not possible. The question is how firm. A lot of times the people that teach firm corners are teaching students to make them too tight. And which brings me to Anthony's oh, let me do this. Cardo says, "Thank you, Eddie. I noticed that I get a buzz on the mouthpiece only if I put a finger at the end of the shank and cover half of the hole." Oh, okay. So yes, You know, there's a lot of people that do that. Are you talking about like that? You're it might be, yeah, it might be a mouthpiece size thing. That's something you're going to want to experiment. Let me reiterate what I just said about all physical stuff should be musical reasons. That applies to the mouthpiece too, and mouthpiece buzz. So the actual mouthpiece itself and the buzzing of the mouthpiece, those two things are, I consider them abstract exercises. They don't have a direct impact on the trumpet playing. It's only indirect. You can drop both of those exercises and it won't hurt your playing. And I'm going to say that again. I've said it many times. You can drop both the lip buzz and the mouthpiece buzz completely. The only reason we do them in my routine is because it gives us more data to work with. But the final decision has to come to not how good is the buzz. The final decision is, what does all of this do for my performance? We never lose track of that. So we wouldn't just change a mouthpiece to make your buzz better. I want to make that clear because it might have sounded like I was saying that before. We never do that. Okay? We never change mouthpiece just to make your buzz better. We change mouthpiece to make our playing better. But the buzz, here's the thing about the buzz can help us figure out how to do that. But we don't do that by making sure that the buzz sounds good. Okay, we do the buzz so that the playing sounds good. I hope that makes sense. All right. Anthony says, how long do you buzz? The buzzing should be the shortest out of all the exercises that you do. I'm saying about 10%, maybe 5% of your practice time. And that's practice time on your physical stuff, not your musical stuff. So and since your physical stuff should be less than half of your complete practice time, then we're really talking about 5 to 2.5%. Now let me answer Anthony's other question here. I'm not going to read the whole context. I'm just going to address the second part. Anthony, you said, my question is, how would you know if you're playing efficiently? The answer to that question is by the sound. You cannot get a great sound without playing efficiently. Okay? Efficiency comes from intonation. Now, that might sound like I'm contradicting what you told us last week. Well, I mean, contradicting my response to what you told us last week. No, I'm not contradicting myself. That person who told you this is almost right, but it's only right intellectually. I'm saying when I say I'm suspicious, it's this process of taking the trumpet off while you have. Once the tubing distance changes, you can't expect the pitch to stay the same. You will have to make the pitch stay the same. So I don't. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, he had a friend that said that the way you check if you're playing efficiently is to take the horn off while you're playing, and if the buzz is the same as intonation as the one that you put on the trumpet, then you're playing efficiently. I question that. I don't know for sure that that doesn't work. The concept is right. Because in order to play efficiently, we have to play perfectly in tune, not in tune to the tuner. We have to play perfectly in tune to the trumpet. That's not the same thing. And this perfectly in tune to the trumpet thing is another abstract concept. There's no way to measure this in a practical way that is useful to us. This is just like what we were talking about with the other stuff that we were talking about earlier. I forgot what we were talking about, but it's the same thing. We were talking about corners. There's no way for me to measure my corner strength and share that with you so that you know you're doing the same corner strength. To me, the whole concept of corner strength is an abstract concept. I might be using the word abstract incorrectly. I hope you guys understand what it is I'm trying to say. It's not something we can measure. It's not something quantifiable. It's not something we can even communicate from one person to the next. You know, this is like, I'm going to give you an example, and I can't believe I put this on Facebook one day and people chewed me out for this. I went to the doctor. Now, I said it before as an anonymous thing, but it was because I had gone to the doctor. The doctor looks at me and says, and looks at my numbers and says, you need to eat less red meat. Now, on the surface, that sounds like good logic. On the surface, that sounds like good logic. As a logical thinking person, it's got one major flaw, one humongous major flaw. I hope you guys can see this. How does the doctor know how much red meat I'm already eating? The doctor doesn't know that. We never discussed how much red meat I'm eating. For those of you um, who have read The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien, this is like when uh, Bilbo was down in the bottom of the mountain and having this contest with Gollum, and said, and they were having a riddle contest, and the last riddle that Bilbo came up with was, "What's in my pocket?" That's not a riddle. That can't be figured out. Just like you can't tell me to eat less red meat before you know how much red meat I'm eating. Less than what? That's a mathematical equation. That's a mathematical equation. And and it's the same thing here when we're talking about, so what are we talking about? Um, Let me remind myself here. Oh, efficiency. When we're talking about playing perfectly in tune, when we're talking about corners, neither one of those things is quantifiable. It's just like saying you need to eat less red meat. It, those, all three of those things, firmer corners, perfectly in tune to the horn, and less red meat, all three of them are non-statements. They have no logical meaning. They have absolutely no logical meaning. So, but that's how we know. I actually believe that the whole efficiency thing is kind of stupid, personally. Because of what I'm talking about. It's another way for people to stand up in front of a crowd and sound like they know what they're talking about. And there's no way you can prove them wrong because those things are not quantifiable. And that's what I mean by abstract. The concept of efficiency, the concept of firm corners, both of those are abstract. I'm getting too excited. Okay, Denzel. Hello, Denzel. Nice to see you. Denzel says, "Hi. When I'm playing the trumpet at the start, it's only air that goes out before the sound. What could be possible reason for that?" Well, it can be um, that the mouthpiece is the wrong size. That can be a problem. Now, what you can do is take. Let me ask you this: do you ever do buzz without the mouthpiece? Can you do the buzz in the trumpet frequency? Can you buzz that in that? So the highest that we would consider trumpet, maybe around there for a trumpet buzz. Can you do that? That would be my first question. Can you do that without the air first? If you can do that without getting air first, then we start looking at either where it's placed on your lips or the size of the mouthpiece. The same kind of things that we were talking about earlier, those can be an issue. So that's the first thing I would want to know is, can you do a regular buzz without the mouthpiece? So Sean, hello Sean. Oh, I already said hello to Sean. Um, Sean says, have you ever made a list of essential must-have recordings? Uh, well, technically, yes. Okay. I have not recordings, but artists. I haven't done recordings. Why haven't I done recordings? I think because there's too many of them. There's way too many of them. But artists. So I have done for the classical side, I've done on my website, I have that page that has the top classical musicians that you should be listening to. It's a whole page of them with links too. Gabriel says, thank you, Eddie. You're welcome, Gabriel. Anthony says, yes, I'm here. I figured that out. Good. Okay, Janelle says, similar question as Sean. Which trumpet recordings do you suggest we listen to as we develop our listening skills? I've been listening to a bit of a mariachi trumpet. I'd like to expand my list. Um, so let me ask you this, Janelle. Are you a mariachi player? Because I think your listening should match up with what you're trying to accomplish. So if you are trying to play mariachi, then there's certain things I would recommend. Uh, Not necessarily mariachi music, right? But there's certain recordings I would recommend based on stuff that would kind of enhance the mariachi stuff. But if mariachi is something that you're just doing on the side while you pursue a different career path, um, then we would talk about other stuff. I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I've always wanted to play mariachi. Um, and I've played mariachi songs on gigs. I have a good friend that writes the music out for me, and but it's not quite the same thing. And but we get to hear a lot of mariachi music here in Houston. I love listening to it. I actually had, up until the pandemic hit, up until COVID hit, I had a mariachi student. He's a violinist. He has his own mariachi band here in Houston. Um, but when the pandemic hit, he had to stop taking lessons because, so he's a violin player, and then he was learning to play trumpet too. I'll have to contact him and see how he's doing. Okay, Cardo says, okay, I think I will drop those buzzing exercises if they are not mandatory on the routine. That's right. The thing is, I have plenty of students myself that I tell them, you know what, don't do the buzz. Because if, think about it, if the buzzing is abstract, if the purpose of doing the buzzing is to enhance your playing, and it ends up just frustrating you and making you mad and screwing you up, why would you continue to do it? That makes no sense. So there are students that I have that they all it does is get them wound up all tight and like you know frustrated. And if you can't do them without getting frustrated, then you really shouldn't be doing them at all. That's my opinion. See, I'm not from that camp that says everybody's got to do lip buzz. There are people like that, like that's the best exercise in the world. That's not the best exercise in the world. It's beneficial. If it's beneficial for you, you should do it. But it's not necessary. The pyramid works. You can take, another example. There's people that don't believe in doing pedal tones. So you don't do pedal tones if you're doing the routine. You skip the pedal tones, don't do them. Anthony says, playing efficiently, what exactly does this mean? So when you play the horn exactly in tune, the instrument resonates. It resonates fully. The way they talk about it in uh, acoustics classes is they talk about the optimum resonant frequency. It's a closed pipe at an optimum resonant frequency. The standing wave is initiated, and when that standing wave is initiated, the instrument practically plays itself. And if the instrument's practically playing itself, you don't have to work so hard to make it do stuff. That's what efficiency is. It- in the context of trumpet playing, now, there are a bunch of people out there, and it's just like that for all of these dogmatic things. There are people that figured this out a long time ago who taught students, who taught students, who taught students, and now, generations down the line, you've got these people who are teaching efficiency that have no clue what it is. They're teaching efficiency as a relaxation thing instead of an intonation thing, and they're screwing up literally hundreds of trumpet players. Okay? They're literally screwing hundreds of trumpet players out there, making the trumpet players that adopt this stuff end up making their playing worse, more frustrating, more work, which is ironic, right? Because it's supposed to make it easier. So this is what I mean by an abstract thing. The people who are teaching efficiency, most of them don't even talk about tone quality. If you have a, if you are playing your horn at the optimum resonant frequency, the tone that comes out is absolutely gorgeous. That's the only indicator you need to know. It's almost angelic the way the tone comes out when you play that way. And it's because of that resonant frequency. If the resonant frequency um, is exactly perfect, you will get a standing wave that will do most of the work for you. Gabriel says, "Your doctor didn't tell you nothing about eating alligators?" Hey, that's supposed to be Anthony's job. That's funny. Oh my. Sean says, while listening to jazz trumpet solos, sometimes it sounds like the players miss notes or play wrong notes. Am I wrong? No, of course. Nobody plays perfectly, and that's more true when we're just improvising. So we have cracked notes. We have sometimes where the notes end up in the wrong chords, or the wrong notes over the chords, stuff like that. Yes, that happens. Um, I like to compare jazz. I like to say that comparing classical and jazz to the Bible. I compare classical music, and I'm talking about the culture of classical music is like Old Testament, and jazz is more like New Testament. And I'll let you guys chew on that for a while before I explain it. Maybe we'll talk about it next time. But yes, that I made that comparison about 15 years ago. Hello, Ganya. Nice to see you. He says, "How have you ever played on Broadway?" No, I have not. I've played Broadway musicals with with casts from Broadway, but I've never played on Broadway. I'm not sure that I ever would want to. I know a lot of people covet those jobs, but that's not something I would. It's a nice paycheck. I think my understanding is it's a halfway decent paycheck, but I don't think I could do that. I think it would be different if I was more of a fan of musicals. I don't dislike them, but I'm not a big fan of them either. Okay, Sean says, if you have certain numbers, then the doctor knows you are eating red meat, therefore eat less. Yes, that's the kind of logic that they use. That's the kind of logic that they use, but that's based on them assuming that they actually know what they're talking about. I think they're just as bad as trumpet teachers. I think the doctors are. Do you know what it is? I have, and the only reason I'm talking about it is because it's just as true for trumpet teachers and um, trumpet stars and all that. What we have in our society today is an absence of humility. And what we're talking about here is that kind of assumption is based on an absence of humility. It's the same thing what we're talking about with the stuff that the teachers are saying, right? Um, they don't even question themselves. When they tell you firmer corners, they don't even question themselves. They just know you have to have firmer corners. That is a lack of humility. That is an issue of pride. It's that assumption is based on a lack of humility. That they actually believe that they know so much that they can tell you that your corners need to be firmer, even though they can't measure their corners and they can't measure your corners. And a lot of times, what they'll do is they will have research that say, "See, I told you." The firm, there, this person here, they'll do research. They'll put like little things that'll measure how firm something is or something like that. Okay. Um, and then, you know what I mean? So then they'll have, uh, uh, that data that, you know, quasi-scientific data that says people who play better, have firmer corners, and they'll have stuff like that. But it's having data doesn't make something that's abstract less abstract. How, even if you have that data, how do you know my corners are not firm enough? Tell me that. How do you know? And so the thing is that we have, it's an epidemic of um I would say ignorance, right? I would say ignorance, but it's not, the ignorance is not the cause. The cause of the ignorance is pride. And the reason they're proud is because they have no humility. So the essence of all this stuff, it's not just trumpet, it's all of it. All of it. They have no humility. And part of that is because of the keeping up appearances social network world that we live in. So much of this engine, this social engine that we're living in, is driven by proving to everybody you know what you're talking about. The whole engine is based on you following me because I know the answer. And so even people who don't feel themselves like they actually have the answer, they present because they believe this will help everybody, so that even though they maybe are insecure. Now, insecurity is not the same thing as humility. Maybe if they're insecure, they still present a confident. Uh, I hope I'm making sense. All of this falls under that context. Janelle says she played in high school. So, so tell me, Janelle, what kind of playing do you want to do today? Cardo says, Eddie, do you know if Miles Davis followed any kind of warm-up routine or he just simply practiced music on the trumpet? I have no clue. I seem to remember him talking about some of that in some of those last interviews that he did. But I don't know. There are some players that don't practice any exercises at all. That is a thing. Anthony says corner's not firm. Nah, that's alligator doo-doo. Yeah, Gabriel says in Miles's biography, he said he studied a lot too. That's right. So we do know the famous story about how when he got to New York, Dizzy Gillespie told him to start practicing piano. So we know that. Um, but I don't know if anybody has ever tracked down the kind of exercises that he does or anything like that. That's something I don't know. It's been so long since I read his autobiography. I don't remember. The only exercise I remember he talked about, and I think this was on an interview, was about how to learn how to tongue. And I teach this to my students all the time. Putting the piece of rice on your tongue and spitting it. And that's how he was taught to tongue. And I use that for the beginners. Anthony says, I saw a video. This fellow said your corners are too tight. Yep. See, that's what I'm saying. There are better ways to say all of that stuff. There are better ways to say that stuff. I hope you guys don't mind me going off on a tirade about stuff that's more philosophical. Um, I wouldn't be talking about those things if it didn't have a direct impact on what you guys digest on, we've talked about that before. There's so much information on YouTube and the internet for that matter. And I think I've never been one of those that says, oh, you need to not look at that. I think you should look at all of it. But you have to have a brain to process it with. Don't just accept everything that you see out there, including my stuff, right? If you find stuff that I'm saying that doesn't make any sense, I would actually appreciate if you challenge me on it. Because when you challenge me on that stuff, it makes me a better teacher, it makes me a better player, and everyone who's watching will benefit from it, including you. So if you find things that are not making sense, it makes sense to actually bring it up and we will discuss it. I do not present myself. If you ever thought this of me, please consider otherwise. I never presented myself as a know-it-all um, uh, expert. I don't present myself as an expert. The only thing I'm an expert on is my method. If you ask me, is it right to do this? Is it right to do that? I will tell you what the method is. That said, is it okay for you to take my method, adapt it to your own needs? Yes, of course. Is it still my method? Kind of, but not really. Is that all right? Yes, it's absolutely all right. I never present myself here as an expert that knows all the answers. What I do here is I share with you my experiences, my thought process, my stories, and I hope that with you digesting these ideas and thoughts and all this stuff that I share with you, my hope is that you will take this and mature your own brains, your own thoughts, to the point where you have your own opinions on these things. I'm not trying to tell you what the right way is, what the wrong way is. So like this thing last week about the efficiency. I didn't say he was wrong. I said I'm suspicious. Not the same thing. I said I'm suspicious. Janelle says, I'm not approaching my trumpet playing as a vocation since I am going into natural resource. Is that view correct? That makes sense, yes. But I love playing, enjoy it very much. I played in band and mariachi in high school. I want to play with friends and maybe at church. Okay, so in that light, I would strongly recommend brass ensemble recordings. Like there's, if you can find any of the um, Canadian brass, Empire brass, uh, Manozel, German brass. I think there's a Berlin brass. That's where I would point you towards, is listening to the brass bands. Not brass bands. Well, brass bands too. Brass ensembles. There's brass band actually means something different. Brass band is the British wind bands that they have that are mostly brass. I think it's brass and percussion. But that's talking about what recordings to listen to, I think where what you just described to me, the most beneficial for you would be those brass ensembles. So I'm going to say them one more time. Empire Brass, Canadian Brass, Berlin Brass, Monozel. There's one from Spain. I forget I forget what the one from Spain is called. Beautiful. I got to hear them live. Wonderful band. Um, German brass and the Berlin brass. I think it's. Oh, and you know what? There's also the London brass. And if you want something older, there is the. I forget the name of the band. There's a wonderful brass band from like 30, 40 years ago from London. I think those players ended up being part of the London Virtuosi, but I don't remember the exact details. I can't remember the band's name. Um, they put out some absolutely wonderful albums. Anyway, I hope you guys all your questions got answered. If I have time to do one more maybe. Any other questions before I sign off? Okay. So, you're welcome, Janelle. Thank you guys. As always, thank you for hanging out. Let me remind you again, starting today, we're just doing this once a month. I'm just going to try that for a while because it is going to take more time to do it the way I'm doing it. Um, because it takes me about 4 hours of work. And the actual doing the Q and A is one of those hours. I have 3 other hours invested into each one of these now. And I just can't justify doing that every week now. And but I want to do it that way because it's a better product for you guys. Okay? All right, with that said, God bless you guys. We'll see you next time. I don't have a date for it right now, but we'll see you next time we have this. Okay? Thank you, and we'll see you next time. God bless you. Bye.